The transmission arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, beamed directly into every government communication hub on Earth. Admiral Catherine Cole stood in the command center of the United Earth Defense Council, watching the holographic display flicker to life, with the image of a creature that looked like a towering insect merged with crystalline formations. The being's multiple eyes reflected light in prismatic patterns as it spoke in a synthesized voice that had been translated into every major Earth language simultaneously. "Humans of Earth," the creature announced, its mandibles clicking with each syllable. "I am High Arbiter Zelvoth of the Galactic Council. We have observed your species for 3 of your decades. We have watched you make contact with the Vellani people, form your so-called alliance, and begin trading technology and resources. This communication serves as your formal notice. You will immediately surrender all military assets, dissolve your alliance with the Vellani, and submit yourselves to Galactic Council governance. You have 100 of your standard hours to comply. Failure to do so will result in the complete subjugation of your species." The transmission ended, leaving behind only static and the profound silence of every human who had witnessed it. Catherine felt her jaw tighten as she turned to face the assembled officers and diplomats. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and the years of service had carved deep lines around her eyes, but those eyes remained sharp as broken glass. "Get me President Harrison," she said quietly, "and get me Ambassador Talith. We need to talk." 3 hours later, Catherine sat in a secure conference room with a small group of humanity's most powerful decision-makers. President Marcus Harrison was a tall man with dark skin and graying temples, known for his calm demeanor even in crisis. Beside him sat Secretary of Defense Patricia Webb, whose reputation for strategic brilliance was matched only by her willingness to make difficult choices. On a holographic display, the image of Ambassador Talith shimmered with gentle blue light. Talith was Vellani, and like all her people, she resembled something between a dolphin and a humanoid, with smooth blue-gray skin, large dark eyes that seemed to hold infinite depths, and delicate fins that traced the contours of her skull. The Vellani had been humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, discovered quite by accident when a deep space probe had wandered into their system 32 years ago. Unlike the hostile or indifferent aliens of human fiction, the Vellani had been curious, welcoming, and remarkably kind. "We must explain," Talith said, her voice carrying the melodic undertones characteristic of her species. "The Galactic Council is not what your people might imagine. They are not a governing body dedicated to peace or cooperation. They are an empire wearing the mask of diplomacy. For thousands of years, they have expanded by offering species a choice: join willingly and be allowed to maintain some autonomy, or resist and be conquered utterly." "And the Vellani?" President Harrison asked. "Where does your species stand in this?" Talith's expression shifted into something that might have been sorrow. "We were conquered long ago. 4 centuries past, the Council came to our worlds with the same ultimatum they have given you. We were a peaceful people then with no significant military capabilities. We submitted. Since that day, we have existed as a client species, our technology and resources exploited, our population controlled, our freedom a memory passed down in whispered stories." "Then why help us?" Catherine asked. "Why risk everything to make contact with humanity?" "Because you are different," Talith replied. "When we first observed your species, we expected to find another civilization that would eventually fall under Council dominion. Instead, we found something remarkable. Your people have a capacity for both great violence and great compassion. You wage wars among yourselves, yet you also sacrifice for strangers. You destroy, yet you also create with breathtaking beauty. And most importantly, when the Council observers dismissed your species as primitive and insignificant, we saw potential." Secretary Webb leaned forward. "What exactly do you mean by potential? The Council has never faced a species quite like yours. Every civilization they have encountered falls into predictable patterns. The peaceful ones submit. The warlike ones fight briefly and are overwhelmed by superior numbers and technology. But humans are neither wholly peaceful nor wholly warlike. You adapt. You innovate under pressure. You form bonds of loyalty that transcend logic. And perhaps most importantly, you never truly stop fighting, even when defeat seems certain. President Harrison was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured but firm. You said the Villani were conquered. Does that mean there are those among your people who would resist the council if given the chance? For the first time since the conversation began, something like hope flickered in Talith's eyes. More than you know. The resistance has existed for generations, growing slowly, carefully, always in the shadows. When we learned that your species would soon face the council's ultimatum, there were those among us who argued for staying hidden, for maintaining our cover. But others believed this was the moment we had been waiting for, a chance to finally fight back, with allies who might actually win. Catherine stood and walked to the window, looking out at the night sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the familiar constellations, a vast empire waited to crush humanity beneath its heel. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something else rising in her chest, something fierce and determined. The Villani took a tremendous risk reaching out to us, she said. They shared their technology, helped us prepare, all knowing that if the council discovered their betrayal, the consequences would be devastating. They did this because they believed in us. She turned back to face the room. I say we show them that belief was not misplaced. President Harrison nodded slowly. I agree, but we need to understand exactly what we're facing. High Arbiter Zelvoth spoke of subjugation. What does that actually mean for a species that resists? Talith's expression darkened. The Council employs what they call pacification protocols. For a species that surrenders peacefully, these are relatively mild. Population monitoring, resource quotas, restrictions on military development. But for those who resist, she paused, and when she continued, her voice was heavy with old grief. The Tharics were a warrior species who refused to submit. The Council spent 50 years systematically destroying their civilization, not just their military, but their culture, their history, their genetic diversity. Today, the Tharics exist only as laborers, their spirits broken, their heritage erased. They are a warning to all other species of what defiance costs. The room was silent. Secretary Webb's face had gone pale, but her eyes remained steady. Then we have no choice, she said. Surrender means slow death. At least resistance gives us a chance. There is something else you should know, Talith added. The Council has never lost a war, not once in their 6,000 years of expansion. They believe themselves invincible, and that belief has made them complacent. They expect you to either surrender or put up a brief, futile resistance. They are not prepared for a species that will fight with everything they have, for as long as it takes. President Harrison rose from his chair and straightened his jacket. Then let us teach them a lesson they will never forget. Catherine, I want a full strategic assessment within 12 hours. Patricia, begin mobilizing all military assets. And Talith, please convey to your resistance. Humanity accepts your alliance, and we will fight beside you until the Council falls or we do. Talith bowed her head, and when she raised it, tears were streaming down her face, glistening like liquid starlight. Thank you, she whispered. You have given my people something we had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. The next 72 hours were a blur of frantic activity. Military bases across Earth and the solar system switched to high alert. Factories that had been producing civilian goods were rapidly converted to military production. Scientists who had been working on peaceful applications of Villani technology were reassigned to weapons development. And throughout it all, a message was broadcast across every human communication channel. We will not surrender, we will not submit, we will fight. Commander Daniel Price stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Resolute, watching the stars wheel past the viewport. He was 38 years old, with sandy brown hair just beginning to show threads of gray and a face that had been called handsome before the stress of command had begun to leave its marks. Beside him stood his first officer, Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, a compact woman with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Fleet reports all ships at battle stations, Maria said. Weapon systems are charged, shields are at full power. We're as ready as we're going to be. Daniel nodded, not taking his eyes from the viewport. Any word from the Villani fleet? They're holding position on our flank as planned. Captain Nerith sends his regards and says his people are ready to die for the Alliance if necessary. Let's hope it doesn't come to that for anyone. Daniel finally turned from the viewport. But if it does, we'll make sure their sacrifice means something. The Council fleet arrived exactly 100 hours after the ultimatum was delivered, emerging from faster-than-light travel in a formation that spoke of absolute confidence. There were hundreds of ships, ranging from massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons to sleek cruisers designed for speed and precision strikes. At the center of the formation floated a vessel, so enormous it seemed to dwarf everything around it, the Council flagship, carrying High Arbiter Zelvoth himself. A communication request flickered on Daniel's console. He accepted it, and the holographic image of Zelvoth materialized on the bridge. The High Arbiter's compound eyes swept across the human bridge crew with something that might have been contempt or might have been curiosity. "Humans," Zelvoth said, his translated voice dripping with disdain. "Your deadline has passed. I am informed that you have rejected our generous offer of peaceful integration. I confess to some disappointment, though not surprise. Primitive species often fail to recognize wisdom when it is offered to them." Daniel felt anger flare in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "We rejected your offer because it wasn't an offer. It was a threat dressed up in diplomatic language. We don't respond well to threats." "Indeed." Zelvoth's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "And I see you have convinced the Velani to join your foolish resistance. How touching. A doomed species allying with another doomed species. The Council will remember to add both your civilizations to the same memorial after this is over." "You might want to wait before planning that memorial," Daniel replied. "We have a habit of surprising people who underestimate us." Zelvoth made a gesture that was probably dismissive. "Very well, your destruction will serve as an example to other species considering defiance. I shall enjoy watching." The transmission ended and Daniel turned to his crew. "All stations prepare for combat. Signal all ships, weapons free. Let's show these bastards what humans are made of." The Battle of Earth, as it would later be called, began with a ferocity that caught even the experienced Council commanders off guard. Human ships surged forward in patterns that seemed almost random but were actually carefully orchestrated to create confusion and present no unified target. Velani vessels, faster and more maneuverable than their human counterparts, darted through the Council formation, striking at vulnerable points and withdrawing before retaliation could be organized. The Resolute dove into the heart of the Council fleet, her weapons blazing. Energy beams lanced out from her forward batteries, while missile bays launched salvo after salvo into the enemy ranks. Around her, human ships fought with desperate courage, taking hits that would have crippled vessels designed for more cautious warfare and continuing to fight regardless. "Direct hit on enemy cruiser," Maria shouted over the din of combat. "They're breaking formation. Keep the pressure on," Daniel ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup." The Council fleet, for all its numerical superiority, was struggling to adapt. For thousands of years, they had fought species that either surrendered quickly or fought in predictable patterns. Human tactics were neither. Ships that appeared to be retreating suddenly turned and launched devastating attacks. Vessels that seemed disabled proved to have been playing dead, only to come roaring back to life at critical moments. And always, the Velani were there, slipping through gaps in the Council lines, striking at communications and supply ships, sowing chaos wherever they went. Aboard his flagship, Zelvoth watched the battle with growing disbelief. This was not how subjugation was supposed to proceed. The humans should have been overwhelmed within the first hour. Instead, his fleet was taking losses it had never anticipated, and the battle showed no signs of ending. "Order all ships to fall back to Formation Gamma," he commanded. "We will regroup and crush them with a coordinated assault." But as his fleet began to pull back, a new wave of human ships emerged from behind Earth's moon, where they had been hiding in sensor shadow. Fresh reinforcements slammed into the Council's flank, and what had been a tactical withdrawal became a scramble for survival. The battle raged for 18 hours. Human casualties were severe, entire ships lost to Council weapons that vastly outclassed their own. But for every human ship destroyed, 2 Council vessels were damaged or disabled. The Velani, fighting with a fury born of 4 centuries of suppressed rage, proved devastatingly effective, their intimate knowledge of Council technology allowing them to target critical weaknesses that human sensors would never have detected. When Zelvoth finally ordered a general retreat, nearly a third of his fleet had been destroyed or captured. His flagship limped away into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind the wreckage of his shattered confidence. For the first time in 6,000 years, the Galactic Council had been defeated in open battle. The victory at Earth sent shockwaves through the galaxy. News of the Council's defeat spread through the networks that connected thousands of worlds, carried by traders and travelers and spies. On 100 subject planets, oppressed species whispered the name of humanity with something approaching reverence. The Masters were not invincible after all. They could be beaten. They could bleed. Admiral Cole stood in the ruins of what had been the Council fleet's command center, watching through the viewport as human engineers worked to salvage useful technology from captured vessels. The battle had cost humanity dearly, thousands of lives lost, dozens of ships destroyed, but they had survived. More than that, they had won. Ambassador Talith materialized beside her, her holographic form flickering slightly due to the damage sustained by the communication relays. "The Council is already gathering a second fleet," she reported. "Larger than the first. They will not make the mistake of underestimating you again." "Good," Catherine replied, surprising herself with the steel in her own voice. "Let them come, and let them come knowing that every ship they send against us is one less ship they can use to hold their empire together. You mean to expand the war. I mean to end it, not just defend ourselves, but bring the fight to them. Strike at their supply lines, their production centers, the foundations of their power. And everywhere we go, we offer the same choice to the species under their control: join us or stay enslaved." Talith was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you understand what you are proposing? Total war against an empire that spans half the galaxy. The cost will be beyond imagination." "I know." Catherine turned to face the ambassador, her expression resolute. "But there's something the Council doesn't understand about humans. When we fight for something we believe in, we don't count the cost. We don't weigh our chances. We simply refuse to stop until we've won or we've died trying. And right now, we're fighting for something more important than just ourselves. We're fighting for every species that has suffered under Council rule. We're fighting for the Velani who risked everything to reach out to us. We're fighting for a galaxy where species are free to determine their own futures." "That is a beautiful dream," Talith said softly. "Then let's make it real." The war that followed would be remembered for millennia. Human fleets, augmented by Velani technology and crewed by soldiers from a growing coalition of liberated species, struck at the Council with relentless determination. Battle after battle was fought across the stars, each victory encouraging more worlds to rise up against their oppressors, each defeat only hardening the resolve of those who remained. Commander Daniel Price became one of the war's most celebrated heroes. The Resolute, repaired and upgraded with captured Council technology, led strike after strike into the heart of enemy territory. Daniel's tactics became required study at military academies across the coalition. His ability to turn impossible odds into improbable victories, inspiring soldiers who had never met him in person. But war, even righteous war, extracts its toll. Daniel lost friends, colleagues, officers he had trained and come to love like family. He watched entire worlds burn as the Council implemented increasingly desperate measures to halt the human advance. He made decisions that would haunt him for the rest of his life, sacrificing ships and crews to achieve strategic objectives, knowing that each name on the casualty lists represented a universe of lost potential. Maria Santos died in the assault on the Council's primary shipyards, her vessel ramming a Council dreadnought to create an opening for the rest of the fleet. Daniel was on the bridge when he received the news, and for a moment, the weight of everything he had lost threatened to crush him. But then he remembered why they were fighting, and he straightened his spine, and he gave the order to continue the attack. The war lasted 11 years, 11 years of blood and fire and the slow, inexorable grinding down of the Galactic Council's 6,000-year hegemony. By the end, the coalition included over 200 species, each with their own grievances against the Council, each bringing unique capabilities to the fight. The Therics, those broken warriors Talith had spoken of, rose up with a vengeance that terrified even their allies, their long-suppressed rage finally unleashed against those who had destroyed their civilization. The final battle took place above the Council homeworld, a planet called Nexus Prime in the human translation. The combined fleets of the Coalition faced the last remnants of Council military power, both sides knowing that the outcome would determine the shape of the galaxy for centuries to come. Admiral Cole, now 64 years old and bearing the weight of the war in every line of her face, commanded the Coalition forces from the bridge of the newly constructed flagship, Unity. Beside her stood Daniel Price, promoted to captain after the loss of his previous command, his sandy hair now more gray than brown, his eyes carrying the shadows of everyone he had lost. "This is it," Catherine said, watching the Council fleet arrange itself for defense. "Everything we've fought for comes down to this moment." "The Coalition stands ready," Daniel reported. "All species, all fleets, united for the first time in galactic history. Whatever happens today, we've already accomplished something unprecedented." A communication request came through, and Catherine accepted it. The holographic image of Zelvoth appeared, but he was not the arrogant creature who had delivered the ultimatum 11 years ago. The High Arbiter looked old, defeated, his compound eyes dull and his crystalline formations cracked and faded. "Admiral Cole," he said, his translated voice heavy with exhaustion, "I request terms of surrender." Catherine felt something shift in her chest. She had imagined this moment countless times over the years, had rehearsed what she would say, how she would make the Council pay for every life they had taken, every world they had oppressed, every crime they had committed in the name of order. But now, facing the broken remnant of her enemy, she found that her anger had faded, replaced by something that might have been pity. "You demanded our surrender once," she said slowly. "You threatened to subjugate our species, to erase everything we had built. Do you remember what we said in response?" Zelvoth's mandibles clicked softly. "You said you would teach us a lesson we would never forget. And have we?" The High Arbiter was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a civilization's worth of regret. "Yes, you have taught us that the universe is far larger and stranger than we ever imagined. That power unchecked becomes weakness. That even the smallest species can change the course of history if they refuse to accept their designated place in the order of things." Catherine nodded. "Then here are terms. The Galactic Council as it exists will be dissolved. All subject species will be granted immediate independence. A new governing body will be established, one where every species has an equal voice, where conflicts are resolved through negotiation rather than force, where no one is ever again told that their only choices are submission or destruction." "And what of my people?" Zelvoth asked. "What of the species that made up the Council? They will have the same rights and responsibilities as everyone else. No more, no less. The sins of the Council will not be inherited by future generations, but neither will they be forgotten. There must be accountability for what was done, but there must also be a path forward." Zelvoth studied her for a long moment, his compound eyes searching her face for deception or hidden cruelty. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him. "You are a remarkable species," he said finally. "I believe I understand now why the Vellani placed such faith in you. Very well. The Council accepts your terms. The war is over." The transmission ended, and Catherine slumped back in her chair, feeling the accumulated exhaustion of 11 years finally beginning to settle into her bones. Around her, the bridge crew was silent, as if afraid that speaking might shatter the moment. "We did it," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We actually did it." "We all did it," Catherine corrected. "Humans and Vellani and every other species that stood with us. This victory belongs to everyone who refused to accept that tyranny was inevitable." She stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the fleets that had followed her across the galaxy. Human ships floated beside Vellani vessels, Therics warcraft alongside cruisers from dozens of other species. A coalition built on the radical notion that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the odds. A holographic display flickered to life beside her, and Talith's image appeared. The Vellani ambassador was weeping openly, her tears glittering like stars as they rolled down her smooth cheeks. "Thank you," Talith said. "I have spoken those words to you before, but they have never been more inadequate. You have given the galaxy something it has not known for 6,000 years, the chance to begin again." Catherine reached out as if to touch the hologram, a gesture of comfort that spanned the void between their ships. "We couldn't have done it without you. Without the Vellani who reached out to us, who saw something in humanity worth believing in, who risked everything for the possibility of a better future. This victory belongs to your people as much as mine." "Then let us build that future together," Talith said. "Let us create something worthy of all those who gave their lives to make this moment possible." The years that followed were not easy. Building a new galactic order from the ashes of the old proved to be almost as challenging as the war itself. There were disagreements, setbacks, moments when it seemed like the coalition might fracture under the weight of its own diversity. But always, someone would step forward to remind everyone of what they had accomplished together, of the bonds forged in the crucible of shared struggle. The Galactic Assembly was established on a world chosen specifically for its neutrality, a planet that had never been touched by the Council's influence. Representatives from every species gathered there, human and Vellani, Therics and former council members, all working together to create a system that would prevent the rise of another tyranny. Catherine Cole lived to see the Assembly's 10th anniversary, watching from her retirement home on Earth as the new order she had helped create continued to grow and evolve. When she passed away quietly in her sleep, messages of condolence and gratitude poured in from across the galaxy, from species she had never met, from worlds she had never visited, all of them thanking her for what she had done. Daniel Price took command of the Assembly's peacekeeping fleet, spending his remaining years ensuring that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. He never forgot the friends he had lost, carrying their memory with him like a constant companion, letting their sacrifice inform every decision he made. And Talith, who had started it all by reaching out across the void to a species her people barely knew, became the Assembly's first elected chancellor. Under her leadership, the Vellani people finally emerged from the shadows of their long subjugation, contributing their wisdom and their kindness to a galaxy that was slowly learning to value such things. In the end, the story of humanity's war against the Galactic Council became legend, told and retold on thousands of worlds in hundreds of languages. It was a story about courage and sacrifice, about the power of friendship across the boundaries of species, about the refusal to accept that tyranny was the natural order of things. But more than anything, it was a story about what happens when someone demands your surrender, and you answer with a simple truth: we will fight for our friends, we will fight for what's right, and we will never ever stop. The galaxy had learned what humanity was made of, and in learning, it had been transformed forever. On the anniversary of the war's end, a ceremony was held at the memorial constructed on Nexus Prime, the former heart of the Council's empire. Representatives from every species in the Assembly gathered to remember those who had fallen and to celebrate the peace they had won together. A young human officer named Christopher Hayes stood among the crowd, watching as Chancellor Talith spoke of unity and hope. He was 23 years old, born after the war's end, raised in a galaxy where humans and Vellani and countless other species lived together in relative peace. To him, the war was history, something from textbooks and grandparent stories. But as he listened to Talith's words, as he looked around at the impossible diversity of beings gathered in this place, Christopher began to understand something important. The peace he had grown up in was not inevitable. It had been bought with blood and tears, and the determination of people who refused to accept that some species were meant to rule and others to serve. His grandmother, a veteran of the war's early battles, had told him stories about the fear and the doubt and the terrible moments when it seemed like everything might be lost. But she had also told him about the hope, the fierce joy of fighting alongside allies who believed in the same cause, the unshakable conviction that what they were doing mattered. "We fought because we had to," she had said. "But we won because we believed in ourselves and each other, in the possibility of a better future." Never forget that, Christopher. Never forget what we're capable of when we stand together. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Christopher found himself standing before a particular section of the memorial wall. Names were carved into the stone, human names alongside Velani script and the symbols of 100 other species. He traced one name with his finger, Maria Santos, who had given her life to create an opening for victory. A Velani civilian approached and stood beside him, looking at the same names. The Velani was old, her blue-gray skin faded and her fins drooping with age, but her eyes remained bright and clear. "Did you know her?" the Velani asked, gesturing at Maria's name. "No," Christopher admitted, "but my grandmother served with her. She said Maria was the bravest person she ever knew." The Velani nodded slowly. "My daughter served in the same fleet. She spoke of Maria often, said she was an inspiration to everyone who knew her." The old Velani was quiet for a moment. "My daughter's name is on this wall too. She fell in the final battle." Christopher turned to face her fully, seeing the ancient grief that still lingered in those dark eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be sorry," the Velani replied. "Be grateful. My daughter died believing that her sacrifice would help create a better galaxy. Every year when I come here and see creatures like you, young people from dozens of species standing together in peace, I know her belief was justified." She reached out and touched Christopher's hand, a gesture of connection that would have been unthinkable between their species just a few decades ago. "Your people gave us hope when we had none left. You answered our call for help when you could have protected yourselves by staying silent. For that my people will be grateful until the stars themselves grow cold." Christopher felt tears prick at his eyes. "We couldn't have one without the Velani. Your people's courage, your willingness to risk everything for a chance at freedom, that's what made the difference." The old Velani smiled, an expression that looked remarkably like a human smile despite the differences in their facial structures. "Perhaps that is the true lesson of the war. None of us could have succeeded alone. But together, standing united against those who sought to divide and conquer us, we proved that there is no force in the universe stronger than beings who fight for what they believe in." They stood together in silence, human and Velani, looking at the names of those who had given everything so that future generations might live in peace. The sun was setting over Nexus Prime, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, and somewhere in the distance, a child of a species Christopher didn't recognize was laughing with pure, uninhibited joy. It was, Christopher thought, exactly what all those who had fought and died had been fighting for. Not just victory over an oppressor, but the creation of something new. A galaxy where children of any species could laugh freely, where enemies could become friends, where the future was something to be built together rather than imposed from above. The Galactic Council had demanded humanity's surrender, believing that fear and superior force were all that mattered. They had been wrong. What mattered was conviction, loyalty, the bonds between beings who recognized each other as worthy of respect and protection. Humanity had answered the Council's demand with total war, not because humans loved violence, but because some things were worth fighting for. Friendship was worth fighting for. Freedom was worth fighting for. The right to determine one's own future was worth fighting for. And in the end, that willingness to fight, to sacrifice, to never give up no matter the odds, had changed everything. As darkness fell over the memorial and the stars emerged one by one in the night sky, Christopher made a silent promise. He would remember. He would honor the sacrifice of those who came before. And if the need ever arose again, he would stand ready to fight, just as his grandmother had, just as humanity always had when their friends needed them. Because that was what it meant to be human. Not perfection, not superiority, but the simple, fierce determination to stand by those you care about, no matter what the universe throws at you. The Velani had seen that potential in humanity from the very beginning. And humanity had proven, through blood and fire and unyielding resolve, that the Villani's faith had been well placed. It was, Christopher reflected as he turned to leave the memorial, the best thing his species had ever done. And he was prouder than he had ever been, to carry that legacy forward into whatever challenges the future might bring. The end.